wolves attacked two lonely bear cubs. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through towering pines, casting golden patches across the forest floor. In a small clearing stood a rustic cabin, its wooden walls weathered by seasons of rain and snow. Inside, 10-month-old Noah Bennett played quietly on a handmade quilt, his tiny fingers grasping at wooden toys while his mother, Clara, prepared breakfast in the kitchen. Clara loved their peaceful life at the edge of Whispering Pines Forest. Her husband Daniel worked as a forest ranger and had gone out earlier that morning to check on reports of unusual wildlife activity. "I'll be back before noon," he had promised, kissing both Clara and Noah before heading into the woods. Outside, not far from the cabin's porch, two bear cubs huddled together beneath a fallen log. Their chocolate-brown fur was matted with debris, and their small bodies trembled with fear and hunger. Something had happened to their mother during the night. Perhaps hunters, perhaps another predator, but the cubs had been alone for hours now, their plaintive cries growing weaker as the morning progressed. Noah's ears perked up at the sound. Even at his young age, he seemed unusually attuned to the world around him. Clara often marveled at how her son would pause and listen to birdsong or watch raindrops slide down window panes with complete fascination. Now, as the cub's whimpers drifted through the partially open window, Noah turned his head, his blue eyes widening with curiosity. Clara didn't notice her son's reaction as she stirred a pot of oatmeal on the stove. "Just a few more minutes, sweetie," she called over her shoulder, unaware that Noah had already begun crawling toward the front door, which had been left slightly ajar to let in the fresh morning air. The forest fell silent suddenly, an unnatural hush spreading through the trees. The cubs sensed it first, pressing closer together, their tiny claws digging into the earth. From the shadows between the trees emerged three gray wolves, their lean bodies moving with predatory grace. Hunger sharpened their yellow eyes as they spotted the defenseless cubs. The alpha wolf, larger than the others with a scar across his muzzle, sniffed the air and growled low in his throat. The pack had been driven from their usual hunting grounds by human encroachment, forcing them closer to the cabin than they would normally venture. Desperate and hungry, they had picked up the scent of the orphaned cubs. Noah reached the doorway just as the wolves began circling their prey. The cubs were now backing against a tree trunk, nowhere left to run. Their frightened cries grew louder, cutting through the morning stillness. Something inside Noah seemed to understand their distress. With determination unusual for a baby his age, he pushed against the door, opening it wide enough to crawl through onto the porch. Clara was still in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast, unaware that her son had made his way outside. Noah paused at the edge of the porch steps, his small hands gripping the wooden boards, as he watched the scene unfolding just yards away. The wolves crept closer to the cubs, who were now standing on their hind legs, swatting helplessly at the air with tiny paws. The alpha wolf bared its teeth, preparing to lunge. In that moment, Noah did something extraordinary. He let out a sound. Not a cry of fear, but a sound of concern. A noise somewhere between a coo and a call. The unusual sound carried across the clearing, causing the wolves to hesitate, their ears flicking toward this new distraction. Noah began to rock back and forth, building momentum before sliding down the single porch step onto the grass. The movement caught the alpha wolf's attention. The predator turned, yellow eyes locking onto the human baby, now crawling slowly but deliberately toward the terrifying scene. The two smaller wolves continued stalking the cubs, who had taken advantage of the alpha's distraction to scramble partway up the tree trunk. but they were too young, too inexperienced to climb properly, and they clung precariously to the bark, certain to fall back into the wolves' waiting jaws at any moment. Noah continued forward, moving with that strange determination. A fallen pine cone lay in his path, and he picked it up, examined it briefly, then tossed it with surprising accuracy. The small projectile landed just in front of the alpha wolf, who jumped back, startled by the unexpected object. Clara finally realized the kitchen had grown too quiet. "Noah?" she called, receiving no answer. Her heart raced as she rushed to the front room and saw the open door. "Noah!" she screamed, running to the porch just in time to see her baby sitting in the grass, facing 3 wolves and 2 bear cubs trapped against. Time seemed to freeze. Clara's instinct was to rush forward, to snatch her child from danger, but fear paralyzed her. Any sudden movement might trigger the wolves to attack. She gripped the porch railing, her knuckles white, a prayer forming on her lips. What happened next would change everything. The alpha wolf took a cautious step toward Noah, sniffing the air. Noah showed no fear. Instead, he smiled. That pure, innocent smile that had melted Clara's heart countless times. He reached out a tiny hand toward the wolf, babbling softly as if trying to communicate. The wolf stopped, confusion evident in its posture. This small human showed none of the fear or aggression it had come to expect. The other wolves sensed their leader's hesitation and paused their advance on the cubs, who remained frozen against the tree. A deep roar suddenly echoed through the forest. From the opposite side of the clearing charged an enormous female bear, her fur bristling with rage as she spotted her cubs in danger. Clara's scream caught in her throat. The situation had gone from bad to worse. Now a mother bear was racing toward her baby. But instead of attacking Noah, the bear swerved around him, positioning herself between her cubs and the wolves. The wolves backed away, growling but unwilling to face this new threat. The mother bear stood on her hind legs, towering over the scene, her roar shaking leaves from the trees. Noah, still sitting calmly in the grass, watched with fascination. Then, to Clara's astonishment, he giggled. A sound of pure delight that rang out across the clearing like bells on a winter morning. The sound seemed to affect everyone present. The wolves' growls subsided. The mother bear lowered herself to all fours, her aggressive stance softening. She turned to look at Noah, their eyes meeting in a moment of impossible understanding. Clara finally found the courage to move. Slowly, carefully, she descended the porch steps and began inching toward her son. "Noah," she whispered, "stay very still, baby." But Noah didn't need the warning. He remained where he was, a tiny mediator in a wild standoff. The mother bear nudged her cubs down from the tree and gathered them close, all while keeping her eyes on Noah. The wolves, sensing the changing dynamic, began to retreat, slinking back toward the forest shadows. Clara reached Noah and gently lifted him into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "My brave, foolish baby," she murmured against his hair. The mother bear shepherded her cubs away, pausing once to look back at the human mother and child. In that moment, Clara felt a connection she couldn't explain, a shared understanding of maternal love and the fierce protective instinct that transcended species. As the bear family disappeared into the forest and the wolves melted away, Clara held Noah close, overcome with gratitude and wonder. A twig snapped nearby, and she turned to see Daniel rushing toward them, rifle in hand. "I heard the bear," he panted, then froze as Clara silently shook her head, tears still falling. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she said softly. "Our son, he just—" Words failed her. Later that evening, as word spread through the nearby town of what had happened, embellished with each telling. People came to see the baby who had somehow stopped a wolf attack and calmed a raging mother bear. They wanted to understand how such a tiny human had created peace where there should have been bloodshed. Clara couldn't explain it, not really. She just knew that Noah had shown something pure and unafraid in the face of danger, something that even wild animals had recognized and respected, something that reminded everyone who heard the story that innocence and compassion could still work miracles in this often harsh world. That night, as she rocked Noah to sleep, Clara whispered, "You reminded us all of something today, my little peacemaker, something we grown-ups forget too easily." Noah drifted to sleep with a smile on his face, dreaming perhaps of new friends made in the dappled sunlight of a forest clearing. Friends with fur and fangs and hearts not so different from his own after all. And throughout the valley, as the story was told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, there wasn't a dry eye to be found. For in a world that so often seemed defined by conflict and fear, a baby had shown that sometimes the bravest response to danger isn't aggression, but a simple, open-hearted kindness that can touch even the wildest of souls. Days passed, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Daniel noticed unusual patterns in animal behavior around their cabin. Birds would perch on their windowsills for hours. Deer ventured closer than ever before, grazing calmly while Noah watched from his blanket on the porch. Even a red fox began making regular appearances, sitting at the forest's edge as if standing guard. "Something's changed," Daniel whispered to Clara one evening as they watched a family of rabbits hop boldly across their yard. "It's like they're no longer afraid of us." Clara nodded, bouncing Noah gently on her hip. Or maybe they're just curious about him. She glanced down at their son, who was reaching toward the rabbits with delight. Our little woodland ambassador. What the Bennett family didn't know was that deeper in the forest, an even more unusual development was unfolding. The mother bear and her cubs had established a den less than a mile from the cabin, much closer than bears typically ventured to human dwellings. The wolf pack, too, had shifted their hunting territory, maintaining a respectful distance, but remaining within the vicinity of the clearing where that strange encounter had occurred. Park rangers reported these anomalies at their monthly meeting. "Never seen anything like it," said Ranger Thompson, a grizzled veteran with 30 years' experience. "It's like they've established some kind of truce zone around that cabin." Daniel listened, without mentioning his family's experience. Some things were too sacred, too inexplicable to share with colleagues who dealt in scientific facts and wildlife management protocols. As winter approached, Clara noticed Noah growing restless. He would crawl to the windows and press his hands against the glass, gazing into the forest with longing. His first word wasn't "mama" or "dada" as they'd expected, but a distinct sound that resembled the huffing noise bears make when communicating with their young. "Daniel," Clara said one night after they'd put Noah to bed, "I'm worried about him. He seems different since that day, like he's waiting for something." Daniel put his arm around his wife. "He's fine, Clara. Just an unusual kid with a big heart. That's nothing to worry about." But Clara wasn't convinced. She began to have strange dreams. Dreams of Noah walking into the forest, followed by creatures of all kinds. In these dreams, she tried to call him back, but he never turned around. She would wake gasping, rushing to check his crib, only to find him sleeping peacefully. The first snow fell in November, covering the forest in a pristine white blanket. That morning, Clara was washing dishes when she heard Noah's excited babbling from the living room. Looking up, she froze. Outside the window, standing in their yard, was the mother bear with her cubs, now considerably larger than they had been during the summer. "Daniel," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. Her husband appeared from the hallway and stopped dead in his tracks. "Don't move," he said quietly. "I'll get the rifle." "No!" Clara grabbed his arm. "Look at Noah." Their son was pressing against the window, making that strange huffing sound again. The mother bear approached slowly, her cubs trailing behind. She stopped just feet from the glass, raised herself slightly and placed one massive paw gently against the window exactly where Noah's tiny hand rested on the other side. Clara couldn't breathe. The bear's eyes, intelligent, aware, seemed to be communicating something profound. After a moment, she dropped back to all fours, nudged her cubs, and they disappeared back into the forest. "She came to say goodbye," Clara whispered, tears filling her eyes. "They're going to hibernate." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "That's not... bears don't..." But he had no rational explanation for what they'd just witnessed. That night, a blizzard hit the mountains with unexpected ferocity. Wind howled around their cabin, rattling the windows and sending snow swirling into impenetrable white curtains. Daniel stoked the fire higher, worried about their dwindling firewood supply. "If this keeps up, we might need to move into town until it passes," he told Clara as they huddled under blankets. At midnight, the power went out. The temperature inside the cabin dropped rapidly, despite the fireplace. Clara brought Noah into their bed, wrapping him in extra blankets. "He's shivering," she said anxiously, feeling his tiny fingers growing cold despite her efforts. Daniel pulled on his heavy coat. "I need to check the generator." Clara wanted to protest. The storm was too dangerous. But they needed heat for Noah. She watched fearfully as her husband disappeared into the swirling white darkness outside. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30. Daniel hadn't returned. "Daniel!" Clara called from the doorway, her voice snatched away by the howling wind. No answer came. Panic rose in her throat. She closed the door and returned to Noah, who was now awake and making distressed noises. "It's okay, baby," she soothed, though she felt anything but calm herself. "Daddy will be back soon." Another hour passed. The fire was dying. The cabin grew colder. Clara wrapped Noah in every blanket they owned and tried the phone again, still dead. She had to make a decision: stay and risk freezing, or try to reach their truck and drive to town. Just as she was preparing to bundle Noah for the journey, she heard a sound at the door, not knocking, but a strange scratching. Heart pounding, she approached cautiously. "Daniel?" she called. The scratching continued. Taking a deep breath, Clara cracked open the door. Through the gap, she saw not her husband, but the scarred face of the alpha wolf. Clara gasped, slamming the door shut. But Noah began making excited noises, crawling toward the door with determination. "No, Noah!" Clara scooped him up, retreating to the far corner of the room. The scratching continued, more insistent now. Noah struggled in her arms, reaching toward the door and making that strange huffing sound again. Could it be possible? Clara wondered, her mind racing. Was the wolf trying to help them? Against every instinct, Clara approached the door again. With trembling hands, she opened it wider this time. The alpha wolf stood in the snow, unmoving. Behind him, barely visible through the storm, were dark shapes, the rest of the pack. The wolf turned and took a few steps, then looked back at Clara expectantly. Noah made an encouraging sound. "He wants us to follow him," Clara whispered to herself, scarcely believing the thought. Was she going mad from fear and cold? But what choice did she have? Daniel was missing, the cabin was freezing, and Noah needed warmth. With shaking hands, Clara bundled Noah against her chest, wrapped them both in the thickest blanket, and stepped out into the storm. The wolf waited patiently, then began walking slowly enough for her to follow. The journey through the blizzard was a nightmare of whipping snow and numbing cold. Clara could barely see the wolf ahead of her, trusting only that he was leading her somewhere safer than the freezing cabin. She clutched Noah tightly, his small body warm against hers. Strangely, he showed no fear, only a serene confidence that baffled his terrified mother. After what seemed like hours but was perhaps only 20 minutes, the wolf led them to a hillside. Clara squinted through the snow and realized they were approaching a cave entrance, partially hidden by evergreen boughs. The wolf disappeared inside. Clara hesitated at the threshold. Was she walking into a trap? Noah made an insistent noise, and again, Clara found herself trusting her baby's inexplicable instincts. She ducked into the cave. The interior was surprisingly warm. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Clara gasped. Daniel lay unconscious on the cave floor, his leg clearly injured. Surrounding him, generating heat with their bodies, were the mother bear and her cubs. The wolf pack had settled around the edges of the cave, maintaining a respectful distance from the bears, but clearly part of this strange alliance. One of the wolves, a smaller female, was licking Daniel's face gently, as if trying to revive him. "Daniel!" Clara rushed to her husband's side, checking for a pulse. It was there, steady beneath her fingertips. Relief washed over her. He was alive. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. "Clara?" he murmured, disoriented. "What? Where are we?" His eyes widened as he registered the bears and wolves. "Am I dreaming?" "No," Clara said softly, helping him sit up. I think they saved you. And then they came for us." She looked around the cave in wonder. "They're protecting us from the storm." Daniel winced as he shifted his injured leg. "I fell near the generator, couldn't get up, the cold. I thought I was dying. Then the wolves found me. I was sure they would attack, but instead they dragged me here." He shook his head in disbelief. Why would they do that? Clara looked down at Noah, who had crawled from her arms and was now sitting contentedly between a wolf pup and the smallest bear cub, making soft noises that the animals seemed to understand. "Because of him," she said simply. "Somehow, he changed everything." Throughout that long night, as the blizzard raged outside, an impossible peace reigned in the cave. The mother bear's body heat kept the temperature comfortable. The wolves took turns standing guard at the entrance. Daniel's leg, while badly sprained, wasn't broken. Clara cleaned and bandaged it using strips torn from the blanket. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered into the cave, illuminating the extraordinary scene within. The Bennett family had survived the night thanks to the very creatures most humans feared most. As they prepared to leave, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "How do you thank wild animals for saving your lives?" she asked Daniel softly. He shook his head, still processing the impossible events. "I don't think we need to. I think this is just the beginning of something we don't fully understand yet." The mother bear rose and nudged her cubs toward the cave entrance. The wolf pack followed, the alpha pausing to look back at Noah once more. Clara swore. The animal nodded slightly before disappearing into the brilliant white landscape outside. Daniel leaned on Clara as they made their slow way back to the cabin, Noah babbling happily in his mother's arms. When they reached the clearing, they stopped in shock. Their yard was filled with animals. Deer, foxes, rabbits, birds of all kinds, all waiting quietly, as if to welcome them home. News of the Bennett family's miraculous survival spread quickly through the region. Scientists and wildlife experts descended on their small cabin, eager to document the unprecedented behavior. Television crews arrived to interview the family who had been saved by wild predators. People from around the world sent letters, many containing their own stories of mysterious connections with animals. 6 months later, the governor established the Noah Bennett Wildlife Sanctuary, 10,000 acres of protected forest where hunting was forbidden, and human impact was strictly limited. The sanctuary became famous for its unusual wildlife behavior, bears and wolves coexisting, predators and prey maintaining a delicate balance without human interference. At the dedication ceremony, Clara stood with 3-year-old Noah on her hip as officials gave speeches about conservation and the mysterious bonds between species. A university researcher approached them afterward. "Mrs. Bennett," the woman said hesitantly, "we've been studying the animal interactions in the sanctuary, and we've documented behaviors that simply can't be explained by known wildlife patterns. Whatever happened that day with your son, it fundamentally altered the ecosystem." She glanced at Noah, who was watching a butterfly with fascination. "Has he always been this way with animals?" Clara smiled. "Noah has always seen the world differently. He doesn't know to be afraid where others would fear. He doesn't see boundaries where we've drawn them." She kissed his forehead. "Maybe that's all it takes to change things? Someone innocent enough to believe that peace is possible." As if to confirm her words, a robin landed boldly on Noah's shoulder, chirping softly in his ear. The little boy giggled, and every person who witnessed it felt tears spring to their eyes, not from sadness or fear, but from a profound sense that they were glimpsing something pure and true that had been lost to the adult world long ago. That night, as Clara tucked Noah into bed, she noticed a small worn path leading from their backyard into the forest. A path made by countless animal feet coming to visit the little boy who had brokered an impossible peace. She didn't worry any more about these visits. Instead, she felt privileged to be witness to a miracle unfolding day by day. A reminder that sometimes the smallest among us can teach the most profound lessons about courage, compassion, and the bonds that connect all living things. 5 years passed. Noah grew from a toddler into a bright, curious 8-year-old with an uncanny affinity for the natural world. The Bennett family had become somewhat famous. Their story had been featured in documentaries, nature magazines, and even inspired a children's book series. They'd declined most interview requests, preferring to maintain their privacy and Noah's normal childhood, but they couldn't escape the wonder their story evoked in everyone who heard it. The sanctuary thrived under Daniel's careful management. He had left his ranger position to become its head conservationist, working alongside scientists to document the unprecedented animal behaviors that continued to evolve. What had begun as a truce between predator species had developed into something researchers tentatively called cooperative ecosystem management. Wolves and bears seemingly working together to maintain balance, predators taking only what they needed, prey species adapting through behavior rather than population decline. On a warm September morning, Clara watched from the kitchen window as Noah sat cross-legged in their backyard, surrounded by his usual entourage: 2 young foxes, a family of rabbits, various birds perched on his shoulders and knees, and occasionally the daughter of the original mother bear, now a half-grown adolescent who visited weekly. The wolves remained more distant but vigilant, appearing at the forest's edge whenever Noah ventured too close to potential danger. "He's going to be late for school again," Daniel said, coming up behind Clara and wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him. "I know. But how do you tell a child to hurry up when he's communing with nature in ways that scientists can't even explain?" Daniel chuckled. Dr. Eliza is coming today. She wants to try that new communication experiment. Clara nodded, a slight frown creasing her brow. Dr. Eliza Chen had become a regular presence in their lives, a respected animal behaviorist who had abandoned her university position to study the sanctuary full-time. While Clara appreciated the woman's genuine fascination with Noah's gift, she sometimes worried about the increasing attention focused on their son. "Noah," she called. "Breakfast and then school, honey." Noah looked up, reluctantly said goodbye to his animal friends and came inside. As he washed his hands, Clara noticed dark circles under his eyes. "Trouble sleeping again?" she asked gently. Noah nodded. The dreams came back. Clara exchanged a worried glance with Daniel. For the past few months, Noah had been experiencing intense dreams that left him tired and sometimes agitated. He described them as messages he couldn't quite understand, visions of the forest in distress, animals fleeing, a sense of impending danger. "Do you want to talk about them?" Daniel asked, setting a plate of pancakes in front of his son. Noah pushed the food around with his fork. "It's the same one. Something bad is coming. The animals are trying to warn me, but I don't understand what they're saying." He looked up, his blue eyes troubled. "Dad, can animals sense earthquakes before they happen?" Daniel blinked in surprise. "Some scientists believe they can, yes. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," Noah said, suddenly focused on his breakfast. After Noah left for school, driven by Clara, who had insisted on homeschooling until last year, when Noah himself had asked to attend the local elementary school to make human friends, Daniel made a phone call to the U.S. Geological Survey Office in Helena. "Any unusual seismic activity in our region lately?" he asked his contact there, a geologist who had consulted on the sanctuary's establishment. "Nothing significant," the man replied. "Why do you ask?" Daniel hesitated. "Just some unusual animal behavior in the sanctuary. Thought I'd check." When he hung up, Dr. Chen's Jeep was pulling up the driveway. The animal behaviorist was in her mid-50s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and an intensity that sometimes made Daniel uncomfortable. "Morning, Daniel," she said briskly. "Is Noah around? I brought the equipment for our session." "He's at school until 3, Daniel reminded her. "But I wanted to talk to you about something. Noah's been having dreams, nightmares really, about some kind of danger coming to the forest. And this morning he specifically asked about animals sensing earthquakes." Dr. Chen's expression sharpened. "That's interesting. I've been noticing some anomalies myself. The migratory birds are leaving weeks earlier than they should. The deer have been moving to higher elevations. Even the wolves seem restless." "What do you think it means?" She shrugged. "Could be nothing. Could be weather-related, or ... "Or what?" Daniel prompted when she didn't continue. "Or your son is picking up on something we can't detect yet." She hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you, Daniel. I've been recording the vocalizations wolves make around Noah compared to their normal communications. They're different, more complex, using frequencies that typically only appear when wolves communicate with other apex predators." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning they don't see him as human, at least not in the way they see other humans." She met his gaze steadily. "They're treating him as something else entirely." Before Daniel could respond, his phone rang. Clara's ringtone. He answered immediately. "Clara? What's wrong?" Her voice came through panicked. "It's Noah. The school just called. He collapsed during math class, had some kind of seizure. I'm on my way to the hospital now." "I'll meet you there," Daniel said, already grabbing his keys. Dr. Chen insisted on coming along. During the tense drive to St. Catherine's Hospital in the nearest town, she kept checking something on her tablet, frowning at the screen. "What is it?" Daniel asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "The wildlife cameras in the sanctuary," she said slowly. "I set them to alert me to unusual activity patterns. In the last hour, there's been a mass movement. Animals are gathering near the cave where you sheltered during the blizzard." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "All species? Together?" "Yes, predators and prey, just waiting." They reached the hospital to find Clara pacing the emergency room waiting area. "They won't let me see him," she said, her face tear-streaked. "They're doing tests. The doctor said he was talking strangely before he lost consciousness, making animal sounds." A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Sharma. Your son is stable, but we're seeing some unusual brain activity we'd like to monitor. Has Noah ever been diagnosed with epilepsy or any neurological conditions?" "No, never," Clara said. "He's always been healthy. Can we see him?" "Of course." "He's awake now, but quite disoriented." They followed Dr. Sharma to a small exam room where Noah lay on a bed, wires connecting him to various monitors. His eyes were open but strangely unfocused. "Noah, honey." Clara rushed to his side. "We're here. You're okay." Noah's gaze found her face, but there was something different in his expression. Something ancient and knowing that didn't belong in a child's eyes. "They're coming," he said, his voice oddly flat. "All of them, together." "Who's coming, sweetie?" Clara asked, stroking his hair. "The forest. The whole forest is coming." His eyes fluttered closed. "To warn us." Dr. Sharma exchanged a concerned glance with his nurse. "Has he experienced any head injuries recently? Exposure to toxins? Unusual stress?" Before Daniel could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. A voice came over the intercom. "Code Silver. All personnel implement emergency protocols immediately." "What's that mean?" Clara asked, clutching Noah's hand tighter. Dr. Sharma's face had gone pale. "It means there's an external threat to the hospital, usually an armed intruder, but..." A nurse burst into the room. "Doctor, you need to see this, now." They followed her to a window at the end of the hallway. The scene below made them all stop breathing for a moment. The hospital parking lot was filled with animals. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Deer stood beside wolves. Foxes and rabbits. Birds of all species perched on cars. And at the front of this impossible gathering, the mother bear and her now-grown daughter stood on their hind legs, facing the hospital entrance. "My God," Dr. Sharma whispered. "What is this?" Dr. Chen was filming with her phone, her hands trembling with excitement. "It's unprecedented. A mass communication attempt." Security guards had positioned themselves at the hospital doors, some holding improvised weapons, their faces masks of confusion and fear. "They'll hurt them." Noah's voice came from behind them. He had disconnected himself from the monitors and followed them, swaying slightly on his feet. "Don't let them hurt my friends." Clara put her arm around him. "Nobody's going to hurt anyone, Noah. But what's happening? Why are they here?" "For me," he said simply. "I have to go to them." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You're staying right here until the doctors—" The building shuddered suddenly. Ceiling tiles cracked. A distant rumble grew louder. "Earthquake!" Dr. Sharma shouted. "Everyone under the door frames." But Noah broke free from Clara's grasp and ran down the hallway toward the stairs. "Noah!" Daniel and Clara shouted in unison, running after him. The tremors intensified. Lights flickered and went out. emergency generators humming to life. Patients and staff were scrambling for safety, making it difficult to keep sight of Noah's small figure darting through the chaos. The animals knew, Dr. Chen gasped as they ran. They were trying to warn us. They burst through the emergency exit just as the strongest tremor yet sent cracks racing up the hospital's facade. Noah was already halfway across the parking lot, moving with unexpected speed toward the assembled animals. As another shockwave rippled through the ground, the bear stepped forward, lowered herself, and Noah climbed onto her back without hesitation. "Noah!" Clara screamed, starting forward, but Daniel held her back as chunks of concrete began falling from the hospital's upper floors. The bear turned and, with Noah securely on her back, began loping away from the hospital, the entire animal assembly following in an ordered procession unlike anything ever documented in natural history. "We have to follow them," Clara sobbed, struggling in Daniel's grip. "Wait," Dr. Chen said, pointing. The animals were headed directly away from the hospital, and moments later they understood why. With a groaning sound, the hospital's east wing collapsed, sending up clouds of dust and debris exactly where they had been standing. The earthquake continued for nearly 2 minutes, an eternity in seismic terms. When it finally subsided, emergency vehicles were already screaming toward the hospital as the stunned survivors gathered in the parking lot. "We need to find Noah," Clara said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "He went into the forest with them." Daniel nodded grimly. "I think I know where they're taking him." The cave. They borrowed a park ranger's truck, its four-wheel drive essential as they navigated roads buckled by the earthquake. Dr. Chen came with them, still recording everything on her phone despite Daniel's irritated glances. The sanctuary had fared better than the town, the natural landscape more resilient to seismic activity than human structures. When they reached the hillside where the cave was located, they found an astonishing sight. Every animal that had been at the hospital, plus dozens more, had formed a protective circle around the cave entrance. As the humans approached, the circle parted silently, creating a path. Inside the cave, illuminated by shafts of afternoon sunlight breaking through cracks in the ceiling, sat Noah, cross-legged and calm. Around him lay wolves and fox cubs, rabbits and squirrels, even a young mountain lion, natural enemies resting in perfect harmony. "Noah," Clara whispered, afraid to disrupt whatever miracle was unfolding. He looked up, and his face broke into a relieved smile. A normal 8-year-old boy again. "Mom, Dad, did you see? They saved everyone." As they rushed to embrace him, the animals respectfully moved aside, maintaining their unprecedented peaceful coexistence. "What happened, Noah?" Daniel asked, checking his son for injuries. "How did you know about the earthquake?" Noah shrugged. "I didn't know what it was. I just knew something bad was coming. The animals have been trying to tell me for weeks in my dreams." He looked around at his assembled protectors. "They wanted to warn everyone, but nobody understands them except me." Dr. Chen was circling the cave, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. "This defies everything we know about interspecies dynamics. Predator and prey existing in complete harmony. It's like the Garden of Eden." In the days that followed, as the region recovered from the 6.7 magnitude earthquake that had miraculously claimed no human lives, Noah's story spread around the world. Footage of the animal gathering at the hospital went viral, spawning endless debates among scientists, religious leaders, and ordinary people trying to make sense of the inexplicable. News crews camped outside the Bennett property, hoping for a glimpse of the animal whisperer, as Noah had been dubbed. Government agencies sent representatives to interview the family. Research institutions offered grants, scholarships, and special programs for Noah. Through it all, Clara and Daniel tried to maintain some normalcy for their son, who seemed embarrassed by the attention and insisted he had done nothing special. "The animals did everything," he kept saying. "I just listened to them." 3 weeks after the earthquake, as media interest was finally beginning to wane, a black SUV with government plates pulled up to their cabin. 2 men in suits emerged, accompanied by a woman wearing a military uniform with general stars. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," one of the men said, showing credentials that identified him as doctor. "Malcolm Reed, special scientific advisor to the president. We need to speak with you and your son. Urgently." Clara felt her protective instincts flare. Regarding what exactly?" The general stepped forward. "I'm General Sarah Collins, Joint Special Operations Command. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level." She glanced around. "May we come inside?" Once seated in the living room, Dr. Reed opened a laptop. 2 days ago, our satellites detected unusual migration patterns across North America. Animals of all species are moving, converging on specific locations. He turned the screen to show them a map with glowing red hotspots. "One of those locations is right here at your sanctuary." "We've noticed increased activity," Daniel admitted. "But what does this have to do with military operations?" General Collins leaned forward. "It's not just here, it's happening globally, and it coincides with predictions of a massive solar flare that will hit Earth in approximately 10 days. Clara felt her blood run cold. "What kind of solar flare?" "The kind that could wipe out our power grid, communication systems, and electronics worldwide," Dr. Reed said grimly. "But that's not why we're here." He glanced at Noah, who was sitting quietly, listening. "Noah, have you been having dreams about the sun?" Noah's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because there are other children like you," General Collins said softly. "Not many, perhaps 20 that we've identified worldwide. All of them under 10 years old. All of them with unusual connections to animals. All of them reporting the same dreams." Clara gripped Daniel's hand tightly. "What are you saying?" Dr. Reed closed his laptop. "We believe these children, including Noah, may be part of an evolutionary response to environmental threats. A new kind of human with enhanced abilities to communicate with other species. And we believe," General Collins added, "that the animals are gathering not just to warn us, but because they're responding to a call. These children are coordinating a response to the solar flare, perhaps the first interspecies cooperation for survival in Earth's history." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "This sounds like science fiction. 6 years ago, would you have believed a baby could stop a wolf attack and change animal behavior throughout an entire ecosystem?" Dr. Reed countered. "We're facing a global catastrophe, Mr. Bennett. The kind that has caused mass extinctions in the past. But this time, something different is happening. Something unprecedented." Noah stood up suddenly. "They're coming to help us," he said with simple certainty. "All of them, but we have to listen." Clara pulled her son close. "What do you want from Noah?" General Collins met her gaze directly. "We want his help coordinating what might be humanity's only chance to prepare for what's coming. The President is prepared to implement emergency measures based on the information these children can provide through their animal connections. But we need Noah to come with us to Washington to join the other children." "Absolutely not," Clara said instantly. "He's 8 years old." "Mom," Noah said quietly, "I need to go. They've been telling me. This is why I can understand them." He looked up at her with those wise eyes that sometimes seemed to belong to someone much older. "I'm not the only one anymore." That night, after the officials had left with a promise to return in the morning for their answer, Clara and Daniel sat on the porch swing, watching the unprecedented gathering of animals at the forest's edge. The mother bear was there, her intelligent eyes reflecting the moonlight as she stood sentinel. "What do we do?" Clara whispered. "How can we send him away? But how can we not, if what they're saying is true?" Daniel had no answers. For hours they debated, cried, and finally prayed for guidance. As dawn broke, they found Noah already dressed and sitting on his bed, a small backpack beside him. "The animals will still protect you," he told them with childlike assurance. "They promised me, but I have to go help the other kids. We have to teach the grown-ups how to listen before it's too late." Clara knelt before her son, tears streaming down her face. "How did my baby get so wise?" Noah hugged her. "Remember the day with the wolves and the cubs? You told me once that I showed something pure and unafraid. I was just a baby then. I didn't know to be scared." His eyes, so blue and clear, met hers. "Maybe that's what the world needs right now. People who aren't too scared to see that we're all connected. People, animals, everything." When the black SUV returned, Clara and Daniel walked their son to it, surrounded by an honor guard of wildlife. Wolves, deer, bears, and countless smaller creatures lining the path in silent support. As Noah climbed into the vehicle, the mother bear rose on her hind legs and let out a roar that echoed through the mountains. Not a sound of aggression, but something that felt remarkably like a blessing. "He'll be safe," General Collins assured them. "And if he's right, if they're all right, he might just help save us all." As the SUV disappeared down the winding road, Clara felt Daniel's arm around her shoulders. "Do you think they're right?" she asked. "About Noah being evolutionary?" Daniel looked out at the animal gathering that showed no signs of dispersing despite Noah's departure. "I don't know. But I do know that 8 years ago, our baby showed us something we'd forgotten. That innocence can sometimes see truth more clearly than experience. Maybe that's what's happening on a larger scale." Clara leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. "I keep thinking about that first day. How close we came to losing him when he crawled outside. How terrified I was when I saw him facing those wolves. And yet, that moment changed everything," Daniel murmured. "One tiny act of courage from someone too young to know better." As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the sanctuary Noah had unknowingly created, Clara and Daniel stood watching the peaceful assembly of creatures whose lives had become inexplicably intertwined with their own. Whatever was coming, whatever Noah and the other special children might face, they had faith in the power of the connection their son had forged between worlds that had long been separate. And throughout the global crisis that followed, as solar flares disrupted power grids and communities rallied to protect their most vulnerable, stories emerged from every continent of animals guiding humans to safety, finding water sources, warning of dangers, and offering protection. Species that had never cooperated began working in tandem, creating safety corridors for human evacuation and sheltering the weak. Scientists would debate for decades what had triggered this evolutionary leap in human-animal relations. Religious leaders would call it divine intervention. But for Clara and Daniel Bennett, the explanation was simpler and truer. A baby had once shown compassion where others would have shown fear, and in doing so had awakened an ancient possibility of harmony between all living things. A harmony that, in humanity's darkest hour, offered a light of hope that moved everyone who witnessed it to tears of wonder and gratitude. Noah's first days in Washington, D.C. were overwhelming. The capital had been transformed into a command center for the impending crisis, with military personnel, scientists, government officials, and emergency response teams working around the clock. He and the other children, 19 in total, ranging in age from 4 to 9, from 12 different countries, were housed in a secure facility beneath the White House, specially modified to accommodate their unique needs. Each child had arrived with their own story of animal connections. 7-year-old May from rural China could communicate with insects, directing swarms of bees and ants with gentle humming sounds. 6-year-old Adebayo from Nigeria had prevented a village massacre by stepping between warring tribes and summoning a pride of lions that stood guard until peace was negotiated. 4-year-old twins Isla and Ian from Scotland had rescued 30 fishermen during a violent storm by calling dolphins to guide their boats to safety. The children recognized one another immediately, embracing like old friends despite never having met. They spoke different languages, came from different cultures and backgrounds, but shared an innate understanding that transcended these barriers. Together, they formed what scientists tentatively called the Harmony Collective, though the children simply called themselves the Listeners. Dr. Amara Wilson, a neurobiologist specializing in human-animal communication, had been appointed as the children's primary liaison. On Noah's third day in Washington, she sat with him in a garden courtyard specially created within the secure facility, complete with trees, flowers, and carefully selected animals that had been cleared through multiple security protocols. "Noah," she said gently, "can you tell me more about what the animals have been showing you about the solar flare?" Noah was stroking a rabbit that had settled contentedly in his lap. Around him, birds perched on nearby branches. Squirrels darted across the grass, and even a red fox lay quietly in the shade. The presence of animals seemed to calm all the children, reducing their anxiety about being separated from their families. "It's not just the flare," Noah explained, his voice remarkably articulate for an 8-year-old. "That's just the beginning. The animals say the Earth is changing. They've felt it coming for a long time, but couldn't tell us. Now they can, through us." He gestured to himself and the other children playing nearby. "Changing how?" Dr. Wilson asked, recording every word. Noah frowned, trying to find the right words for concepts that came to him as feelings and images rather than language. "The sunburst will break many things humans made. Electricity, phones, computers. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is what happens after." "What happens after, Noah?" "Weather gets wild, food gets hard to find. People fight each other instead of helping." His blue eyes clouded with concern. "But it doesn't have to be that way. The animals want to help us if we let them. They know things we forgot." Across the courtyard, May was sitting cross-legged, surrounded by butterflies and bees. "The insects say the flowers know how to survive," she called out in Mandarin, which was instantly translated by an interpreter. "They have been through this before, many times. They bend instead of break." Adebayo, who was communing with a hawk perched on his shoulder, nodded. "The predators say we must work together like a pride. The strong must protect the weak until all are strong again." Dr. Wilson had learned to take these cryptic statements seriously. In the days since the children had been gathered, their collective insights had already helped authorities identify critical infrastructure vulnerabilities and evacuation routes that conventional planning had missed. The President had authorized an unprecedented emergency response protocol based largely on the children's recommendations, mobilizing resources and personnel at a scale not seen since World War II. That evening, as Noah prepared for bed in his specially designed room, which included live plants, small animals in comfortable habitats, and walls painted with murals of forest scenes, he felt a strange tingling at the base of his skull. This sensation had become familiar in recent months, always preceding a particularly important animal communication. He closed his eyes and felt his consciousness expanding, stretching beyond the confines of the underground facility, beyond Washington, reaching out across vast distances. The other children felt it too. In their own rooms, they each entered the same meditative state. What happened next would later be described by Dr. Wilson, who was monitoring the children's brainwave patterns, as a synchronized neural networking event. The children's brain activities aligned perfectly, creating patterns never before recorded in human subjects. Noah found himself standing in a vast, misty space alongside the other 18 children. Before them materialized what appeared to be representatives of every major animal species on Earth: wolves and bears, eagles and ravens, whales and dolphins, elephants and lions, and countless others, all gathered in an impossible assembly. A wolf with distinctive gray markings, the descendant of the alpha wolf that had once threatened the bear cubs outside Noah's childhood home, stepped forward. Through a combination of images, emotions, and instinctive understanding, it communicated to the children. The great burning approaches, Noah translated for the others, though all could understand the message on some level. 3 days from now, the sun's fire will strike the earth. Your kind are not prepared, despite your machines and warnings. Many will perish if you do not listen and act now. An ancient sea turtle moved forward, its shell bearing the marks of centuries of life. We have endured such events before, Noah continued translating. The secret is not in resistance but in adaptation, not in fighting alone but in cooperation. One by one, representative animals shared their species' wisdom, survival strategies, navigational abilities, food location techniques, weather prediction methods, natural medicine knowledge. A vast compendium of evolutionary adaptations that humans had either never known or had long forgotten. When Noah and the other children awakened from this shared vision, they immediately asked to speak with world leaders. Within hours, they were addressing an emergency session of the United Nations via secure video link, their words simultaneously translated into dozens of languages as they relayed the animal's message. "We don't have much time," Noah began, his childish voice carrying a gravity that silenced the assembly of diplomats and heads of state. "The animals have shown us what's coming and how to survive it. But you have to trust us, and them. This isn't about politics or borders or who has more power. It's about working together, all people, all animals, as one family on Earth." What followed was an extraordinary moment in human history. 19 children from around the world delivering a coordinated plan for humanity's survival, drawing on ancient animal wisdom combined with modern human capabilities. They described specific preparations, from positioning emergency resources to establishing communication alternatives, from identifying natural water sources to creating wildlife corridors that would allow animal allies to reach human settlements with critical assistance. By the session's end, even the most skeptical leaders had been swayed by the children's uncanny knowledge and conviction. The United Nations unanimously adopted what would come to be known as the Harmony Protocol, a global cooperative framework unlike anything previously attempted in human governance. 2 days later, as predicted, the most powerful solar flare ever recorded erupted from the sun's surface, hurling a massive coronal mass ejection directly toward Earth. Despite the advanced warning, the impact was catastrophic. Power grids collapsed worldwide. Satellite communications failed. Transportation systems ground to a halt. Modern civilization, dependent on electronics and global supply chains, faced its greatest challenge. Noah and the other children had been relocated to a specially prepared facility in rural Virginia, a farm equipped with solar shielding and minimal electronics, situated near a convergence of wildlife habitats. As reports of widespread chaos filtered in through emergency radio channels, Dr. Wilson observed the children with growing concern. "Shouldn't we be implementing the next phase of the protocol?" she asked Noah, who seemed strangely calm despite the dire news. "Not yet," he replied, sitting cross-legged near the barn where farm animals had gathered in unusual proximity. "The animals say we need to wait. The people need to feel what happens when they try to solve this alone." Throughout that first week after the solar flare, humanity attempted to cope using conventional emergency responses. Military forces were deployed to protect essential resources. Governments implemented rationing. Medical facilities struggled to maintain critical care with backup generators and dwindling supplies. Violence erupted in cities as fear and scarcity drove people to desperate measures. Then, on the 8th day, Noah and the children initiated what they called the calling. Standing together in a meadow, they began making a series of sounds, not quite singing, not quite speaking, something primal and beautiful that transcended language. The sound carried across forests and fields, rivers and mountains, amplified by animal voices that joined in a great chorus that spread outward like ripples in a pond. What happened next was witnessed first in the communities surrounding the Virginia farm, then across the eastern seaboard, then throughout North America, and eventually across every continent. Animals began approaching human settlements, not in fear or aggression, but with purpose. Wolves led people to clean water sources hidden in forests. Birds dropped seeds of fast-growing nutritious plants near refugee camps. Elephants in Africa cleared fallen trees, blocking emergency routes. Dolphins guided fishing vessels to abundant catches in new locations as ocean currents shifted. In the Alps, mountain goats showed stranded hikers to caves where they could shelter from sudden violent storms. Most remarkably, traditional predator-prey relationships seemed temporarily suspended. Rabbits could sit beside foxes, deer walked unharmed past wolf packs, gazelles grazed alongside lions, not everywhere and not all the time, but enough to be unmistakably intentional, focused on the greater crisis at hand. Clara and Daniel Bennett, who had been evacuated from their home when the sanctuary became overwhelmed with animals responding to the calling, watched the phenomenon unfold on a battery-powered television at an emergency shelter in Helena. "It's Noah," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face as news footage showed a bear leading hikers out of a ravine in Yellowstone. "It's what he started all those years ago, but bigger now. So much bigger." By the third week, patterns became clear. Communities that welcomed animal assistance were thriving despite the technological collapse. Those that rejected the unusual partnerships, clinging to conventional approaches, or responding with fear and violence toward the animals, struggled and suffered mounting casualties. President Rebecca Cheng addressed the nation by radio, her voice transmitted through a network of solar-powered emergency stations. "Fellow Americans, we face unprecedented challenges that we cannot overcome alone. The time has come to embrace an extraordinary partnership. The children we once called the Harmony Collective have shown us a path forward, not as masters of this world, but as members of a greater community of life." She paused, emotion evident in her voice. "Today, I am implementing Executive Order 1372, establishing animal cooperation zones nationwide, where the safety of our wildlife partners will be guaranteed as they help us rebuild. This isn't charity on their part, it's survival for all of us." Similar declarations followed from governments worldwide, often prompted by grassroots movements as communities witnessed firsthand the benefits of animal cooperation. The United Nations formalized the Harmony Protocol as international law, with severe penalties for harming animal allies. 4 months after the solar flare, Noah and the other children were reunited with their families at a ceremony in the partially restored White House Rose Garden. The reunion was broadcast globally via the limited communication networks that had been re-established. Clara held Noah tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I've missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too, Mom," Noah said, his voice slightly deeper after months of speaking to world leaders and guiding humanity through crisis. "But I had to do it. Just like that day with the wolves and bear cubs. Sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared." Daniel knelt beside them, embracing his wife and son. "We're so proud of you, Noah. The whole world is—" Noah looked up at his father, his expression suddenly serious beyond his years. "It's not over, Dad. The hard part is next." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, pulling back to search her son's face. Before Noah could answer, President Cheng called for attention. The assembled dignitaries, scientists, military leaders, and family members fell silent as she approached the podium. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," she announced. "The solar flare that devastated our infrastructure also gave us an unprecedented opportunity to rebuild our civilization in harmony with the natural world, rather than in opposition to it." She gestured to the children, who stood together at the front of the gathering. "These remarkable young people have shown us that what we once dismissed as childish fantasy, the ability to communicate with and learn from other species, is in fact humanity's next evolutionary step, awakening just when we needed it most." Dr. Wilson stepped forward, displaying charts on a solar-powered tablet. "Our research suggests these children represent a neurological adaptation that may have been latent in human DNA for millennia, activated by environmental pressures. In simple terms, when our technology failed us, nature provided an alternative path forward." President Cheng nodded. "Which brings me to today's announcement. With unanimous international support, we are establishing the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. Each of our young ambassadors will help train future generations in cross-species communication while guiding the redesign of human communities to better integrate with natural systems." Noah stepped forward, no longer the shy 8-year-old who had arrived in Washington months earlier. "We can't go back to the way things were," he said, his voice carrying across the rose garden. "The animals aren't just helping us temporarily. They're offering us a permanent partnership, a new way of living together on Earth." He looked around at the assembled leaders. "But they need promises from us too. Promises that we'll protect their homes, respect their lives, and remember that the world doesn't belong just to humans." One by one, government representatives came forward to sign the Harmony Accords, a binding international agreement that established new protections for wildlife habitats, banned certain forms of destructive development, and created a framework for ongoing human-animal cooperation. As the ceremony concluded, Noah took his parents' hands and led them to a quiet corner of the garden, where a familiar figure waited, the daughter of the mother bear who had once sheltered the Bennett family during a blizzard. Now, fully grown, she sat calmly among rose bushes, seemingly untroubled by the human gathering nearby. "She came all this way to see us," Noah explained, "to remind us where it all began." Clara approached cautiously, still not entirely comfortable with such close proximity to a creature she had been taught to fear. The bear watched her with intelligent eyes, then extended her massive head in greeting. With trembling fingers, Clara touched the bear's fur. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything you and your mother did for us." The bear made a soft huffing sound that Noah translated with a smile. "She says her mother told her the story many times, about the tiny human who wasn't afraid, who changed everything by simply seeing them as friends rather than enemies." Daniel joined them, placing his hand next to Clara's on the bear's broad forehead. "So, what happens now, Noah? What's the hard part you mentioned?" Noah's expression grew serious again. "Living up to our promises, changing how we think and build and grow. Some people already want to go back to the old ways, now that the immediate danger is past." He stroked the bear's ear. "She says, many animals are worried we'll forget." "We won't forget," Clara said firmly. "Not after everything that's happened." "That's why I'm coming home," Noah said, brightening. "All of us are going back to our communities to help people learn the new way. The sanctuary will become a training center. President Cheng approved it yesterday." Clara's heart soared at the thought of having her son home again, even as she recognized that the Noah returning to them was different from the child who had left, older in spirit if not in years, carrying responsibilities few adults could comprehend. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt differently. A solar flare-resistant technology emerged, but took its place alongside rather than above natural systems. Cities were redesigned with wildlife corridors and interspecies consultation centers. The children of the Harmony Collective grew into teenagers, then young adults, training others with similar latent abilities while continuing to deepen their connections with the animal world. The sanctuary that had begun with a baby's innocent intervention between wolves and bear cubs expanded to encompass thousands of acres, becoming the North American Harmony Institute. Clara served as its administrator while Daniel led its conservation programs, and Noah, gradually growing into the extraordinary role that had chosen him rather than the reverse, divided his time between working with world leaders and simply sitting quietly among his animal friends, listening to wisdom humans had forgotten how to hear. On Noah's 18th birthday, when reports confirmed that animal cooperation had helped human civilization not merely recover, but thrive in new, sustainable ways, Clara found her son where she often did, sitting on the porch of their rebuilt cabin, surrounded by descendants of the original wolves and bears that had changed their lives. "Happy birthday," she said, sitting beside him. "Proud of you doesn't begin to cover it." Noah smiled, the same sweet smile he'd had as a baby, though now on the face of a young man. "I was just thinking about that day, the wolves, the cubs, how scared you must have been when you saw me out there." "Terrified," Clara admitted. "I thought I was about to watch you die." "Instead, you watched me become who I was meant to be." Noah gazed out at the sanctuary, now a thriving example of human-animal cooperation. The bears have a saying, "Fear blinds, but innocence sees clearly." I was too young to know what couldn't be done. Too innocent to know wolves and bears were supposed to be enemies, or that humans and animals couldn't understand each other. Clara took her son's hand, marveling at how the tiny fingers that had once reached fearlessly toward predators had grown strong and capable. "Your father and I wonder sometimes, what would have happened if we'd gotten to you before the wolves came that day? If we'd snatched you back inside immediately?" Noah was silent for a moment. Then he pointed toward the forest edge where the elderly mother bear, the matriarch who had first trusted him as a baby, lay grooming her newest grand cubs. She would say that some meetings are written in the stars, meant to happen no matter what, that when the world needs healing, bridges appear, even in unlikely places. He smiled at his mother. Even between a human baby and creatures everyone thought couldn't understand each other. As twilight settled over the sanctuary, a chorus began. Wolves howling, bears huffing, birds trilling, and 100 other animal voices joining in harmony. Humans living and working at the Institute added their voices too, a tradition that had spread to communities worldwide, celebrating the partnership that had saved humanity from itself. Clara leaned against her son's shoulder, overcome once again by the beauty of what his childhood courage had ultimately created. "I still get tears in my eyes when I think about it," she admitted. "That first moment when I saw the wolves back away, when I realized something impossible was happening." Noah put his arm around her. "The most important things often seem impossible until they happen, like a baby stopping wolves from attacking bear cubs." In Washington, D.C., the Harmony Memorial had recently been completed. A massive sculpture depicting a small child standing between predator and prey, creating peace where there should have been violence. Similar monuments stood in capitals worldwide, reminding humanity of how close it had come to disaster and the unlikely salvation that had emerged from innocence and compassion. But here, in the sanctuary where it all began, no monument was needed. The living legacy continued each day as humans and animals learned from each other, protected each other, and demonstrated that even the most ancient enmities could be overcome when someone was brave enough or innocent enough to believe in a better way. As darkness fell completely, Noah looked up at the stars, the same stars his ancestors had gazed upon for thousands of generations, wondering about their place in the world. But unlike those ancestors, Noah and his generation no longer felt alone or separate from the great web of life that surrounded them. They had remembered what humanity had forgotten, that they were not masters of the earth but members of its family, with responsibilities to their animal kin that were as sacred as any human bond. And it had all begun with a baby who didn't know to be afraid, who reached out instead of pulling back, who saw friendship where others saw only danger, and who, in that single innocent moment, changed the course of human history in ways that would bring tears to the eyes of everyone who heard the story for generations to come. Years later, on Noah's 25th birthday, a special gathering was held at the sanctuary. The original clearing where a baby had once faced down wolves to save bear cubs had been preserved in its natural state, marked only by a simple wooden bench where visitors could sit and reflect. No monument stood there. Noah had insisted that the living legacy of cooperation between species was monument enough. People had traveled from across the world for this occasion. Scientists who had studied the harmony phenomenon, world leaders who had implemented the accords, the grown members of the original Harmony Collective, and countless families whose lives had been saved during the crisis by animal intervention. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across the clearing, Noah stood beside the old mother bear, now in the final season of her life. Her coat had silvered with age, her movements had slowed, but her eyes remained as intelligent and perceptive as ever. Beside her stood her daughter, granddaughter, and great-grandcubs, generations that might never have existed if events had unfolded differently that fateful day. The wolf pack had gathered too, descendants of the original alpha that had threatened the cubs so long ago. Now they sat peacefully among the crowd, no longer perceived as threats, but as essential partners in the new world humanity had built. Clara, her hair now streaked with gray, watched her son with pride that transcended words. Daniel stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his weathered face reflecting the journey they had taken together. 25 years ago today, Noah began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. A mother bear lost track of her cubs. A wolf pack saw an opportunity for an easy meal. And a baby who had just learned to crawl saw something entirely different. Not enemies or predators or prey, but living beings in need of understanding. He knelt beside the old mother bear, gently stroking her graying muzzle. We've learned so much since then. How to listen to the wisdom animals have always been trying to share. How to rebuild our societies in ways that honor all life. how to face challenges together instead of apart. The old bear huffed softly, nuzzling against Noah's hand in a gesture of affection that would have seemed impossible in the world before. But the most important lesson, Noah continued, was the simplest one, the one that started everything. Sometimes courage isn't roaring or fighting or showing strength. Sometimes courage is a tiny hand reaching out in friendship when everyone else would pull back in fear. From the edge of the clearing came a soft sound, the padding of tiny feet on forest floor. The crowd parted as a small girl, no more than 2 years old, toddled forward with the determined, slightly wobbly gait of a child who had only recently mastered walking. Behind her walked her anxious parents, ready to snatch her back at the first sign of danger, their faces reflecting the same protective fear Clara had felt when Noah had ventured out that day long ago. But the little girl, Emma, daughter of researchers at the sanctuary, moved with purpose toward the assembled animals. The crowd held its breath. Though the partnership between humans and animals had become commonplace, such close proximity between a toddler and wild predators still triggered instinctive concern. The old mother bear turned her massive head toward the approaching child. Their eyes met, ancient wisdom and newborn innocence, separated by species but connected by something deeper. Without hesitation, Emma reached up and placed her tiny palm against the bear's grizzled face, exactly as Noah had done with the wolves 25 years earlier. The bear closed her eyes, a rumble of contentment vibrating through her massive frame. Clara found herself weeping, the scene before her an echo of the moment that had changed everything. The moment that had seemed so terrifying but had contained within it the seed of miraculous transformation. Daniel held her tightly, his own eyes glistening with tears. "This is our legacy," Noah said softly. "Not just harmony between species, but the courage to reach out when instinct says to pull back. The wisdom to see that differences don't have to mean division. The understanding that the youngest among us sometimes see truth more clearly than those with decades of learned fears." As he spoke, more children stepped forward, sons and daughters of the gathered crowd. Without prompting or performance, they moved among the assembled animals, stroking fur, whispering secrets, exchanging gentle touches. The bears, wolves, foxes, and countless other creatures responded with the same calm acceptance. The ancient barriers between predator and prey, human and animal, dissolved by the simple, pure connection that children offered without reservation. Dr. Eliza Chen, now elderly but still sharp-eyed, leaned toward Clara. "We've been monitoring brain development in children born after the crisis," she whispered. "The changes we're seeing, it's as if the entire next generation is developing the abilities that only Noah and the other Harmony children originally possessed. Evolution doesn't usually work this quickly, but somehow—" "It's not just evolution," Clara replied, watching as Emma giggled while a wolf pup licked her fingers. "It's remembering. We're remembering how to be part of the world instead of apart from it." As darkness fell completely, someone began to sing, an old lullaby about creatures of the forest. Others joined in, human voices blending with animal sounds in a chorus that seemed to rise toward the emerging stars. The old mother bear lifted her muzzle and added her own rumbling contribution, joined by the howling wolves and the chirping birds. Noah walked to his parents and embraced them both. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Clara asked, brushing a tear from her cheek. "For not rushing out to grab me that day, for letting me follow my heart, even when it led me into danger, for trusting that something beautiful could come from something that seemed so frightening." Daniel smiled, his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think about that moment every day, how close we came to a completely different world. If you hadn't crawled outside when you did. Some things are meant to be, Noah said, echoing the mother bear's wisdom from years ago. Some connections are written in the stars. As the gathering continued into the night, the old mother bear slowly rose and made her way to the edge of the clearing. Noah noticed and followed her, sensing this was important. Clara and Daniel joined them, somehow knowing without being told that this moment mattered. The ancient bear stopped at the exact spot where her cubs had huddled in fear so many years ago. She looked back at Noah, her eyes holding decades of shared history, then up at the star-filled sky. A soft huff escaped her, not pain, but acceptance, completion. "She's saying goodbye," Noah whispered, kneeling beside her. She held on for this day, to close the circle. Clara knelt on the bear's other side, no longer afraid to be so close to the creature that had once embodied her deepest fears. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion, "for everything you've taught us, for saving my family, for helping us build something beautiful from what could have been tragedy." The old bear's eyes met Clara's. In that gaze was understanding deeper than language, the shared experience of mothers who had protected their young, who had witnessed the unfolding of something miraculous, who had seen the world transformed through the actions of their children. With a final gentle huff, the mother bear laid her head down on her paws. Noah stroked her fur as her breathing slowed. Under the witness of stars that had seen the entire history of life on Earth, surrounded by humans and animals united in respectful silence, the mother bear, who had helped change the world, took her final breath. A low, mournful howl rose from the alpha wolf, not threatening now but honoring. Other animal voices joined in a symphony of farewell that humans once would have misinterpreted as random noise, but now recognized as the sacred sending off of a beloved elder. Noah wept openly, his tears falling onto the bear's fur. Yet, even in this moment of loss, there was something beautiful. The natural completion of a life fully lived, a purpose fulfilled, a legacy secured. From the forest edge, the bear's daughter approached with her family, coming to pay their respects. The cycle would continue, the lessons would be passed down, the partnership would endure. As dawn broke over the sanctuary, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Clara stood with her family. Daniel, Noah, and the countless human and animal connections that had become as much a part of their lives as blood relations. The mother bear's body had been respectfully moved to a sacred grove where she would return to the earth that had nourished her. "I remember being so afraid," Clara said softly, "watching the sun rise on this new day. When I saw Noah with the wolves, my heart nearly stopped. I was certain I was about to lose everything I loved. Instead, you gained a world," Daniel said, his arm around her waist. Noah looked out over the sanctuary, now awaking to the day's activities. Researchers and animals working together, children learning interspecies communication, visitors coming to witness the miracle that had begun with one baby's innocent courage. "She told me once that fear is the opposite of love," Noah said, remembering the mother bear's wisdom. "Not hatred, fear. Because fear makes us close down, build walls, see threats instead of connections." He smiled through his grief. "A baby doesn't know to fear what adults have learned to dread. That's why it had to be me, I think. Because I hadn't learned yet that wolves and bears were supposed to be dangerous. I just saw them as they were, living beings who needed understanding." As the sanctuary came fully alive with the day's activities, a little girl's laughter rang out. Emma, playing with the bear cubs who had lost their great-grandmother but gained a human friend. The sound carried across the clearing, pure and joyful, a reminder that even in moments of loss, life continued its beautiful unfolding. Clara watched, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Not tears of fear or grief now, but of overwhelming gratitude and wonder. The mother bear was gone, but her legacy lived on in every peaceful interaction between species that would once have been enemies, in every child who grew up knowing animals as partners rather than threats, in every forest and ocean and mountain where humans now tread with respect instead of dominion. And it had all begun with her baby, crawling toward danger with a heart too innocent to know fear, changing the world not with power or force but with the simple, earth-shattering courage of compassion. As the sun rose fully above the trees, bathing the sanctuary in golden light, Clara looked at her son, the man who had once been that brave baby, and felt her heart might burst with pride and love. "Some stories change us forever," she whispered, as much to herself as to her family. "Some moments rewrite everything we thought we knew about what's possible." Noah nodded, his expression peaceful despite his grief. "And sometimes," he added softly, "the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to be afraid, reach out our hand, and trust that connection can overcome even the oldest divisions." Together, they walked back toward the center of the sanctuary, following the path that had been worn by countless feet, human and animal, since that fateful day when a baby had shown the world that sometimes the purest courage is simply the refusal to see differences as barriers, the refusal to let fear overpower love. And in that refusal, in that single moment of innocent bravery, Noah had written the first words of a new story for all of Earth's children.